Okay, let's take a look at these graphs. We're going to try to find the domain and the range given the graphs. So this first one's kind of, you look at it, it starts up here, it's got an open circle, and it goes down and back up and then back down, and it hits a bottom point right here where x is equal to 8. So for the domain, remember Dixie and Roy, x is going to be my variable. So take your pencil and start over here and stop whenever you get to the -8, because that's where the graph begins. So we're going to put our -8 right here. We're going to put our x in the middle, and then you trace your finger along the x-axis, and the graph stops over here at +8. All right, so you have x in the middle, point your inequalities to the left, and then go look at your circles. Open circle doesn't get the equal to sign. Closed circle gets the equal to sign. So this reads x is greater than a -8 and less than 8. So that's where the graph lives, from -8 to +8. So now let's go do the range. The range is built on the letter y. Remember Roy D? So we have range, and we're going to look at the y's. So if you start down here on the y-axis at -10, the graph doesn't exist. It only begins when you're at -3, right here. So we're going to put our y right here, put our -3, and then let's go up the ladder, and the graph goes to 5, 6, and it looks like it reaches its maximum height at 7. So put your larger number on the right, put your inequalities pointing to the left, and then go look at your circles. So at -3, you see that that's a colored in circle. So it's going to get an equal to sign, and over here at +7, it's an open circle. Perfect. All right, let's take a look at the next one. The next one looks like an upside down V shape. And for the domain, we have our x. Go ahead and start off with that. And on the x-axis here, it starts at -8 again. And it goes across at 0. The graph is up here at 6, it looks like. And it stops again when we get over here to +8. This time, the circle's colored in at the -8. So it's going to get the inequality equal to sign. And at the +8, it's got an open circle. All right, so now let's take a look at the range. Let's start off with our y's over here. And let's take a look at the bottom of the graph. At -10, the graph does not exist, and it reaches its minimum point somewhere right here at -3. Okay, at -3, it is a closed circle, so I'm going to put equal to sign. And then let's keep going up and up and up and up and up and up. And the tallest it ever gets is right here at 7. And there is no open or closed circle, so always make that an equal to sign, okay? Perfect. All right, let's take a look at a couple that go towards infinity down here on the bottom. Just move my paper. And there those are right there for you. All right, perfect. Okay, let's start off with the domain again. And the domain is x. And let's look at it. So this graph, you can see on this left-hand side, it's got an arrow that's pointing down. Well, it's also pointing to the left. So it's pointing down and to the left. So it continues to move to the left, which means that it keeps going towards -infinity. And then over on the right-hand side, the graph moves along. We're here at 6, 7, 8. It looks like at 9, right here is where it stops. It stops with a closed circle, so we're going to do that. And remember, this is perfectly acceptable to leave it like this, but if it's a multiple choice test, you might just see this portion, the -infinity, not there. So then it would just be x is less than or equal to 9. All right, perfect. Now let's move on and look at the range. The range is all about the letter Y. So you see that it keeps pointing down, which means it keeps getting more and more negative. So once again, it's going to be negative infinity. And there's no equal to sign there. And sorry about that. Negative infinity. And then over here on the right-hand side, as we get taller and taller and taller, the graph eventually stops at 7. Okay, perfect. All right, so once again, on a multiple choice test, chances are they won't have that negative infinity in the inequality format, and it'll just look like this. All right, perfect. Very last one, let's look at this one over here. Once again, starting off, just move your finger along the x-axis, and it looks like it begins at -8. And as I'm moving towards positive x values, it keeps getting larger and larger, and that arrow is heading up, but it's also heading to the right. So the largest value is going to be infinity. And the smallest this graph ever gets is -8. It's an open circle, so we don't reshade that. We don't need to put the equal to sign there. And then finally, if we want to drop the infinity part, we have x is greater than a -8. Well, usually the variable's on the left-hand side. Here, the variable x is on the right. No big deal. Just swap the number and the letter, but now be careful with the direction of the opening. The inequality is pointing towards the -8, so there's that. All right, now finally let's do the range. And we have our graph down here at negative. The graph doesn't live there. It only starts coming into existence when y is equal to 4. So that's the smallest the graph ever gets. And as you go up, you can notice that it keeps getting taller and taller and taller, and eventually we'll get to infinity. So once again, we have a positive infinity over here. Arrows are pointing to the left as always, and we do not need to put the equal to sign because that's an open circle and that's infinity. All right, perfect. The last step is to write down what happens if you don't include infinity in the inequality. We would be left with y. We'd be left with this, which is not correct. Go ahead and let's swap the letter and the number, or the variable and the number. So we have our y and our 4. Notice that the inequality is pointing towards the number. So there we go. All right, good luck with the rest of this.